Let me tell you about the day I thought I was going to die, and how it turned out to be the best day of my miserable little life. My name is Zara, and I work as a janitor on the Cosmic Consequences, which is basically the galaxy's worst-rated prison ship. Think of it as a flying tin can filled with the universe's most dangerous criminals, held together by duct tape and the sheer will to not explode in the vacuum of space. I'm what you might call vertically challenged. At 3 feet tall with purple skin and 4 arms, I'm perfectly designed for cleaning hard-to-reach places and absolutely nothing else. The prison hired me because small beings work for cheap, and apparently my species has a reputation for being naturally subservient. Thanks, ancestors. Really nailed that evolutionary strategy. Anyway, I was mopping the corridor outside the maximum security cells when I heard this weird scraping sound. Now, weird sounds on a prison ship usually mean someone's either escaping, dying, or both. I should have walked away. I should have minded my own business. But no, curiosity apparently isn't just deadly for Earth cats. I peeked around the corner and nearly dropped my mop. There was a human, and he was digging through his cell door with what looked like a spoon. A spoon? Do you know what humans are supposed to be capable of? I'd heard the stories. Apex predators, deathworlders. The kind of species that looks at a planet covered in poison and thinks vacation spot. This particular human was about 6 feet tall with brown hair and the kind of build that suggested he could probably bench press a small spacecraft. His name tag read Jake Martinez, prisoner 4471. He was wearing the standard orange jumpsuit, but somehow he made it look like a fashion choice rather than a punishment. I should have run. Every instinct in my 4-chambered heart was screaming at me to get out of there before he noticed me. But I was frozen, watching this absolute unit of a being casually tunnel through reinforced metal with dining utensils like it was no big deal. Then he looked up and made eye contact with me. I'm pretty sure I made a sound like a deflating balloon. Jake tilted his head, looked at me for a moment, then went back to his spoon-based excavation project. Just like that. Like I was about as threatening as a houseplant. "Oh, hey there," he said, not even looking up from his work. "Don't mind me. Just trying to get somewhere with better food options." Better food options? Was he planning to eat me? I scrambled backward and dove into the nearest supply closet, all 4 arms flailing as I tried to hide behind a stack of cleaning supplies. My breathing sounded like a broken air filter, and I was pretty sure my bioluminescent spots were flashing in panic mode. Through the crack in the door, I could see Jake finishing his impromptu renovation project. He brushed metal shavings off his hands like he'd just completed a light home improvement project rather than breaking out of a maximum security cell. "You know," he called out, apparently aware of my hiding spot, "hiding behind the toilet paper isn't really going to help if I actually wanted to find you." I whimpered. This was it. This was how I was going to die, eaten by a human who had just demonstrated the ability to dig through solid metal with cutlery. What happened next completely broke my understanding of how the universe works. Instead of ripping the door off its hinges and dragging me out by my tentacle-like hair, Jake sat down on the floor outside the supply closet, cross-legged, like he was settling in for a casual chat. "So," he said, and I heard the crinkle of wrapper paper. "You hungry?" Hungry. Was this some kind of sick human joke? Were they into psychological torture before the main course? I pressed myself further into the corner, trying to become one with the cleaning supplies. "Look, I get it," Jake continued, apparently having a conversation with a closet door. "I'm sure you've heard all the stories about humans. Probably think I'm some kind of monster who eats everything that moves. But honestly, I'm more of a foodie than a savage." A foodie? What in the 7 moons was a foodie? "I've got half a sandwich here," he said, and I could hear him unwrapping something. Roast beef with provolone, tomatoes, lettuce, and just a touch of horseradish mayo. Made it myself from commissary ingredients. Well, I say made it myself, but really I had to bribe 3 guards and trade my good shoes for the decent bread. I opened the door just a crack. Jake was indeed sitting there, holding what appeared to be a sandwich. It smelled amazing. Nothing on this ship had ever smelled that good. I didn't even know food could smell like that. "There you are," Jake said with a smile that didn't look at all predatory. "Want half?" I always make too much food, or occupational hazard. I stared at him. This was the most dangerous predator in the known galaxy, and he was offering me lunch. My brain couldn't process it. "You're not going to eat me?" I squeaked. Jake looked genuinely confused. "Eat you? Why would I eat you? You're clearly sentient, and besides, I'm trying to cut back on my meat consumption. Bad for the arteries." But you're human. You're supposed to be terrifying." "Terrifying?" Jake laughed, a sound that was surprisingly warm. "Lady, the only thing I'm terrifying at is making a killer marinara sauce. Here, try this." He tore the sandwich in half and held out a piece to me. The smell was incredible. I hadn't realized how hungry I was until that moment. Prison food was basically flavorless nutrient paste, and this thing looked like it had been crafted by some kind of culinary deity. "I can't," I said, though I was practically drooling. "Can't or won't?" Jake asked. "Because if it's a dietary restriction thing, I totally get it. I've got a buddy who's lactose intolerant, and let me tell you, pizza night is a nightmare for him." I don't understand. You broke out of your cell. Aren't you supposed to be escaping?" Jake shrugged. "Technically yes, but not in the way you think. I'm not trying to leave the ship. I'm trying to get to the kitchen. Have you tasted the food they serve here? It's an insult to every ingredient that ever existed. My Italian grandmother is probably rolling in her grave." "Your grandmother?" "Nonna Rosa. She could make a 7-course meal out of cardboard and somehow make it taste like heaven. She always said that feeding people was the most important thing you could do with your life. Jake, she'd say, you judge a civilization by how it treats its food. And this place has failed the test spectacularly." I was starting to think I had fallen into some kind of alternate dimension. This human, this supposed apex predator, was genuinely upset about meal quality. He wasn't planning to eat me. He was planning to improve the prison food. "So you're not escaping to hurt people?" "Hurt people?" Jake looked horrified. "I'm trying to help people. Do you know what prolonged exposure to terrible food does to morale? To the spirit? These guards and prisoners are all walking around like zombies because they're being slowly poisoned by whatever passes for nutrition around here." He held out the sandwich half again. "Please, I made this for sharing. Food is meant to bring people together, not divide them." Against every survival instinct I had, I reached out and took the sandwich. It was warm and the bread was soft, and when I took a bite, I think I actually moaned a little. It was the most incredible thing I had ever tasted. "Good, right?" Jake grinned. "The secret is in the horseradish ratio. Most people go too heavy, but you want just enough to complement the beef without overwhelming the other flavors." I nodded, unable to speak because I was too busy experiencing what actual food tasted like for the first time in my life. "So," Jake said, taking a bite of his own half, "want to help me stage the most delicious prison break in galactic history?" 20 minutes later, I was leading a human through the service corridors of a prison ship, questioning every life choice that had brought me to this moment. Jake had somehow convinced me that helping him reach the kitchen was not only a good idea but a moral imperative. "You know," Jake said, ducking under a low-hanging pipe, "for a ship this size, you'd think they'd invest in better ventilation. The air circulation in here is terrible. Probably why everyone's so grumpy all the time." "Jake," I whispered, "can we please focus on not getting caught?" "Right, sorry, I get chatty when I'm excited. And I'm very excited about the possibilities in that kitchen. I saw the supply manifest when they processed me. They've got everything we need to make something actually edible. We were almost to the kitchen when disaster struck in the form of Captain Vex, the most pompous reptilian officer in the ship's command structure. He rounded the corner just as we were approaching the kitchen door, and his yellow eyes immediately locked onto us. "Halt," he commanded, his voice carrying that particular tone that suggested he'd been waiting his whole career for a chance to use that word dramatically. "Prisoner 4471, you are in violation of your confinement parameters." Jake stopped and turned around, completely calm. "Oh, hey, Captain. Perfect timing. I was just about to upgrade your dining experience." "Upgrade my?" Captain Vex looked confused, which was apparently his default expression. "You are attempting to escape, and you have taken this maintenance worker hostage." "Hostage?" I squeaked. "I'm not a hostage." "You are clearly under duress," Captain Vex declared, pointing one clawed finger at me. "This dangerous human has coerced you into assisting his escape attempt." Jake looked genuinely offended. "Coerced? Captain, I offered her half my sandwich. That's not coercion, that's hospitality." "Sandwich?" Captain Vex's voice cracked slightly. "Yeah, roast beef with provolone. Made it myself. Would have offered you some, but I didn't have enough for 3 people. Next time, though, I'll make sure to prepare adequate portions for everyone." Captain Vex stared at Jake like he was speaking an alien language, which technically he was, since Standard Galactic was everyone's second language. But that wasn't the point. You broke out of maximum security to make sandwiches?" "Not to make sandwiches," Jake corrected. "To make real food. There's a difference. Sandwiches are just the beginning. Do you know what I could do with your food stores? I could turn this place into a 5-star dining experience. Your prisoners would be so well fed and happy, they'd probably volunteer for extra work shifts." That's not how prisons work," Captain Vex said weakly. "Says who?" Jake asked. "Have you ever tried treating prisoners like actual people instead of numbers? Feed someone well, treat them with respect, and they'll surprise you with how civilized they can be." I watched this exchange with growing amazement. Jake was essentially arguing prison reform philosophy with a security officer, and somehow making it sound reasonable. "Besides," Jake continued, "I'm not actually escaping. I'm still on the ship. I'm just relocating to where I can be more useful. Think of it as a voluntary transfer to the culinary department." "We don't have a culinary department," Captain Vex protested. "Well, we do now," Jake said cheerfully. "I'm starting one. Zara here is going to be my assistant." "Aren't you, Zara?" I looked between Jake and Captain Vex, realizing that somehow I had gone from terrified janitor to accomplice in whatever this was. Yes." "Excellent," Jake beamed. "Now, Captain, I'm going to need you to open the kitchen door. I promise I'll make something that'll change your perspective on everything." "I absolutely will not." "Tell you what," Jake interrupted. "Give me 1 hour. 1 hour to show you what real food can do. If you're not completely satisfied, I'll go back to my cell quietly. But if I'm right, and I can make something that transforms this place, then maybe we can work out a more permanent arrangement." Captain Vex looked like he was having an existential crisis. "This is highly irregular." "Captain," Jake said, his voice taking on a more serious tone, "when was the last time you actually enjoyed a meal? When was the last time food brought you joy instead of just keeping you alive?" There was a long pause. Captain Vex's expression shifted from confusion to something almost like longing. "It has been some time," he admitted quietly. "Then what do you have to lose?" Jake asked. "Worst case scenario, you get to throw me in solitary for a few weeks. Best case scenario, you get to eat something that reminds you why food exists in the first place." Captain Vex stood there for a long moment, staring at the kitchen door like it held the secrets of the universe. Finally, he reached for his access card. 1 hour, he said. But I'm staying here to supervise. Wouldn't have it any other way, Jake grinned. Zara, time to see what miracles we can work with prison rations. The prison kitchen was a testament to utilitarian design and the complete absence of any culinary ambition. Stainless steel surfaces, industrial-grade equipment that looked like it could double as spacecraft components, and storage areas filled with ingredients that had probably been sitting there since the ship's maiden voyage. Jake walked through the space like a general surveying a battlefield, then running his hands along the surfaces and opening cabinets with the kind of reverence most people reserved for religious sites. Okay, he said, pulling out containers and examining their contents. We've got the basics. Protein synthesizers, carbohydrate stocks, vitamin supplements, and he opened a container and actually gasped. Real vegetables. Slightly past their prime, but still workable. Captain, who authorized fresh produce? Captain Vex looked embarrassed. There was a budget error. Someone accidentally ordered actual food instead of the usual processed nutrients. Best budget error in galactic history, Jake declared. Zara, can you help me wash these vegetables? And Captain, I don't suppose you know where they keep the seasoning. Seasoning? Captain Vex asked blankly. Spices, herbs, salt, pepper, the things that make food taste like food instead of cardboard. And we have salt packets, Captain Vex offered hopefully. Jake closed his eyes and took a deep breath. Okay, we're going to work with what we have. Sometimes the best meals come from the simplest ingredients. What happened next was like watching a wizard at work. Jake transformed the sterile kitchen into something alive. He started with the vegetables, chopping them with a precision that suggested serious training. The sound of his knife against the cutting board was rhythmic, almost musical. So Jake, I said, washing vegetables in a sink that had probably never seen anything this fresh, what exactly did you do to end up in here? Oh, that, Jake laughed. Aggressive food truck operation without proper permits. Aggressive food truck operation? Yeah, I had this truck called Nana's Revenge. Best Italian food in 3-star systems. Problem was, I kept setting up in spots where other food vendors had exclusive rights. But their food was terrible. I mean, criminally terrible. How could I let people eat that garbage when I could make them something that would actually nourish their souls? Captain Vex was listening with growing fascination. You were imprisoned for running a food truck? Well, that and assault with a deadly sandwich, Jake added casually, starting to heat oil in a large pan. Assault with a deadly sandwich? I squeaked. Health inspector tried to shut me down for unsanitary conditions, which was complete nonsense, by the way. My truck was cleaner than most restaurant kitchens, but he was clearly taking bribes from the competition, so when he started writing me up, I may have thrown a meatball sub at him. You threw a sandwich at a government official? Captain Vex asked, sounding more impressed than horrified. It was a really good sandwich, Jake said defensively, and I aimed for his chest, not his head. I'm not a monster. The smell coming from the pan was starting to fill the kitchen. Jake had somehow turned basic vegetables and protein into something that smelled like heaven. I could hear my stomach growling, and apparently so could Captain Vex's. The thing is, Jake continued, stirring the pan with practiced ease, food isn't just fuel. It's culture. It's love. It's the thing that brings people together and reminds them that life is worth living. When you serve people terrible food, you're basically telling them they don't matter. I never thought about it that way, Captain Vex said quietly. Most people don't. They think food is just something you shove in your mouth to keep going. But watch what happens when you give someone a meal that was made with care. Watch their face light up. Watch them slow down and actually taste something for the first time in years. The kitchen door chimed, and one of the guards poked his head in. Captain, We're getting reports of unusual activity in the kitchen. Well, should we? He stopped mid-sentence as the smell hit him. What is that? That, Jake said, is dinner. Real dinner. Want to try some? I'm on duty, the guard said, but he didn't leave. Guard Thompson, right? Jake asked. I've seen you in the cafeteria. You always look miserable during mealtime. Guard Thompson nodded slowly. The food here is terrible, Jake finished. I know, but it doesn't have to be. Here, try this. He ladled a small portion onto a plate and handed it to the guard. Thompson took a bite, and his expression changed completely. His eyes widened, then closed, and he made a sound that was pure satisfaction. How did you make this from prison rations? He asked. What? Technique, Jake said, and caring about the result. Most food service operations are just about getting calories into people as efficiently as possible. But efficiency and nutrition aren't the same thing. By now, other guards and even a few prisoners were gathering outside the kitchen, drawn by the incredible smells wafting through the corridors. Jake noticed them through the window and waved. Zara, I think we're going to need more plates, he said with a grin that suggested he had planned this all along. Jake, I said, did you break out of your cell just to cook for the entire ship? Not just to cook, Jake corrected. To prove a point, food is a basic human right. And I use human in the universal sense. Every sentient being deserves to eat something that tastes good and makes them feel valued. Captain Vex was staring at his empty plate like it held the secrets of the universe. I had forgotten that food could taste like that. Most people have, Jake said gently. It's not your fault. The galaxy has gotten so focused on efficiency and profit that we've forgotten about the simple pleasure of a good meal. What do we do now? I asked, looking at the growing crowd outside the kitchen. Jake smiled. Now we feed everyone. Because that's what you do when you have good food and hungry people. You share it. What should have been a security incident turned into the most peaceful gathering in the ship's history. Word spread faster than hyperspace communications, and soon we had a line of guards, prisoners, and staff members stretching down the corridor, all waiting for a chance to taste real food. Jake moved through the kitchen like a conductor leading an orchestra, somehow managing to prepare enough food for everyone while maintaining the quality that had started this whole situation. He had enlisted several prisoners to help with preparation, and they worked with the kind of enthusiasm I had never seen in a prison setting. This is highly irregular, Captain Vex muttered, but he was on his third helping, so his protests lacked conviction. Irregular is good sometimes, Jake replied, stirring a massive pot of what smelled like heaven. Regular got us into this mess in the first place. The dining area had transformed into something unrecognizable. Guards and prisoners were sitting together, actually talking instead of maintaining the usual hostile silence. I watched a Zarglonian murderer share a table with the guard who had arrested him, both of them completely focused on their food and arguing about flavor profiles. You know what this reminds me of? Asked Guard Thompson, who had apparently become Jake's unofficial assistant. My grandmother's kitchen during the holidays. Everyone gathered around, sharing stories, actually enjoying each other's company. That's exactly what this is, Jake said. Food has this amazing power to break down barriers. When you're all eating the same thing, when you're all experiencing the same pleasure, it's hard to think of each other as enemies. Warden Krall chose that moment to make his appearance. He was a massive Thrakari, built like a walking boulder, and with a reputation for running the tightest ship in the prison fleet. He stood in the doorway, taking in the scene of his maximum security prison turned into a communal dining hall. What, he said in a voice that could crack planets, is going on here? The entire room fell silent. Jake, however, just smiled and approached the warden with a plate of food. Warden Krall, he said cheerfully. Perfect timing. I was hoping you'd join us for dinner. Dinner? Dinner? The warden looked around the room at guards and prisoners sharing meals and conversation. This is supposed to be a prison, not a restaurant. Why can't it be both? Jake asked. Here, try this. It's a fusion dish I created using your standard protein rations, but I've prepared them with techniques that actually preserve the nutritional value while making them taste like something you'd want to eat. The warden stared at the plate like it might explode. You expect me to eat food prepared by a prisoner? I expect you to eat food prepared by someone who cares about what they're serving, Jake corrected. The fact that I'm a prisoner is just paperwork. This is chaos, the warden declared, but I noticed he was still looking at the plate. With respect, warden, said Guard Thompson, this is the most peaceful I've ever seen the ship. Look around. When was the last time you saw guards and prisoners interacting without hostility? The warden did look around, and I could see his expression shifting from anger to confusion to something almost like wonder. They're talking to each other, he said slowly. That's what happens when you treat people like people, Jake explained. Feed someone well, show them respect, and they'll surprise you with how civilized they can be. I've been saying this all along. But they're criminals, the warden protested weakly. They're people who made bad choices, Jake corrected. Some of them made really bad choices, but that doesn't mean they stop being people. And people respond to kindness. An alarm started blaring, and Captain Vex jumped up from his seat. Security breach in the kitchen. All units respond. The warden looked at him. Captain, you're in the kitchen. Oh, right. Captain Vex turned off the alarm, looking embarrassed. False alarm. Everything is under control. Under control? The warden looked around again at the scene of organized chaos. This is the opposite of control. Is it though? Jake asked. Look at your staff. Look at your prisoners. When was the last time you saw morale this high? When was the last time you had this many people in one space without needing security escorts? The warden was quiet for a long moment. Then, slowly, he took the plate from Jake's hands. He took a bite, chewed thoughtfully, and his expression changed completely. This is, he started, then stopped. This is actually good. Thank you, Jake said simply. I put a lot of care into it. But you're in prison for assault, the warden said, still eating. I threw a sandwich at a corrupt health inspector, Jake clarified. And honestly, I'd do it again. Some things are worth fighting for. The warden looked around the room again, taking in the sight of his prison transformed into a community. What are you proposing? I'm proposing that we remember that food is about more than just keeping people alive, Jake said. I'm proposing that we treat everyone on this ship like they matter. I'm proposing that we prove that rehabilitation is possible when you give people something worth being rehabilitated for. And if I agree to this? The warden asked. Then you'll have the most successful prison in the galaxy, Jake said confidently. Your recidivism rates will plummet. Your staff morale will skyrocket. And everyone will go to bed tonight having experienced something beautiful. The warden stood there for a long moment, looking around the room at guards and prisoners sharing food and stories. Finally, he nodded. 1 month trial period, he said. If your numbers are right, we'll make this permanent. The cheer that went up from the room was unlike anything I had ever heard on a prison ship. 6 months later, the cosmic consequences had become the most requested assignment in the prison fleet. Not because it was easy, Jake made sure everyone worked for their meals, but because it was the only place in the galaxy where prison food was actually something to look forward to. I was promoted from janitor to kitchen coordinator, which was apparently a real job title that Jake had somehow convinced the prison administration to create. My job was to help manage the logistics of feeding 800 people 3 meals a day with food that was actually worth eating. Jake got his sentence reduced to community service, which basically meant he was doing exactly what he had been doing, but now it was official. He had a real kitchen, a real budget, and a team of prisoner assistants who had discovered that cooking was actually a valuable skill that could help them once they were released. "You know," I said to Jake one afternoon as we prepped for dinner service, "I still can't believe that day in the hallway. I was absolutely convinced you were going to eat me." Jake laughed, the same warm sound I had heard that first day. "I get that a lot, actually. Humans have this reputation for being dangerous, but most of us are just trying to get through the day without making things worse for everyone else." "Most of you? Most of you?" "Well, there are always a few who give the rest of us a bad name," Jake admitted. "But the majority of humans are just really passionate about things. Sometimes that passion gets us in trouble. Like throwing sandwiches at health inspectors?" "Like throwing sandwiches at corrupt health inspectors," Jake corrected. "There's an important distinction there." Captain Vex wandered into the kitchen, as he did most afternoons now. He had become something of a food enthusiast, and Jake had been teaching him to cook. It was surreal watching a reptilian security officer carefully seasoning a sauce while discussing the merits of different cooking oils. "Jake," he said, "I've been thinking about what you said about food being culture. I've started researching traditional Saurian cuisine, and I think I'd like to try incorporating some of those techniques into our menu rotation." "That's fantastic," Jake beamed. "Food is always better when it connects people to their heritage. What did you have in mind?" As they discussed the culinary possibilities of fermented kelp and spiced grains, I reflected on how much everything had changed. The ship was still a prison, but it felt more like a community now. People actually looked forward to meals instead of dreading them. Guards and prisoners had developed an odd kind of mutual respect based on shared appreciation for good food. The recidivism rate had dropped to almost zero. Turns out, when you treat people like they matter, they start acting like they matter. When you give them skills they can use, they use them. When you feed them well, they remember what it feels like to be cared for. "Zara," Jake said, interrupting my thoughts, "what's the count for tonight?" "Full house," I replied. 812, including the new transfers. "Excellent. I've got a new recipe I want to try. It's a fusion of Terran and Andromedan techniques that I think is going to blow everyone's minds." "You say that about every new recipe," Captain Vex pointed out. "And I'm right every time," Jake grinned. "Food is like music. Every meal is a new song, and every person who tastes it gets to be part of the performance." "You know," I said, "I used to think humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "We are," Jake said seriously, "but not in the way most people think. We're not dangerous because we're violent. We're dangerous because we're infectious. We make people care about things they never thought they'd care about. We make people believe in possibilities they never imagined." "Is that what you did to me?" I asked. "I didn't do anything to you," Jake said. "I just offered you half a sandwich. You did the rest yourself. But I was terrified of you. And now? Now?" I thought about it. Now I can't imagine my life without this. Without the work we do here. Without the community we've built. Without the knowledge that every meal we serve makes someone's day a little bit better. "That's the most dangerous thing about humans," Jake said with a smile. "We make people believe that things can be better than they are. And once you believe that, you can't go back to accepting less." As we prepared for the evening service, I realized that Jake was right. Humans weren't dangerous because they were predators. They were dangerous because they were dreamers. They looked at the world as it was and imagined how it could be, and then they made it happen, one meal at a time. The dinner bell rang, and the corridors filled with the sound of people making their way to the dining hall. Guards and prisoners, staff and administrators, all coming together for the daily ritual that had transformed our floating prison into something resembling a home. Ready for another show? Jake asked, tying on his apron. Always, I replied. And as we began serving food that was made with care and seasoned with hope, I reflected on the strange truth I had learned. The most dangerous thing about humans wasn't their capacity for violence or their reputation as apex predators. It was their ability to make you believe that everyone deserves to be fed well, treated with respect, and given a chance to be better than they were yesterday. That kind of thinking was absolutely, positively, and completely dangerous to the status quo. And I wouldn't have it any other way.